Could I ask those members who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly, please? Thank you. We will now move on to the final item of business this evening, which is a members' business debate on motion 15207 in the name of Douglas Lumsden on rural roads infrastructure. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons. I call on Douglas Lumsden to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I want to thank members for supporting my motion that's allowed this debate to take place tonight. Presiding Officer, across Scotland, rural communities are dependent on their cars. They are not a luxury, they are an everyday necessity. And constituents use them for every aspect of life, for work, education, shopping, or simply to meet friends and family. For many, the only realistic and reliable option is to drive. They want to do their bit and they work hard to ensure that they are using their cars responsibly, embracing reducing emissions and, wherever possible, using public transport. But often, there is no alternative. Train lines serve our major cities and towns with little reach to more rural communities and villages. Buses are underfunded, often unreliable and therefore difficult to use regularly. This is despite local councils in the North East giving generous subsidies and supporting those local communities to remain connected. In Aberdeenshire, we have seen innovative dial-a-bus service that are key to local communities. Bus companies and local authorities are doing their level best to ensure local communities remain connected to their towns and villages. But with budgets being squeezed, we all know how difficult these decisions become. Members who represent rural communities will know all too well the challenges our constituents face when it comes to roads infrastructure. Potholes that make roads near impassable, bridges that are crumbling, and often roads that are just simply dangerous. Again, all down to local government underfunding from this SNP-devolved government. We all know that the #1 issue on the doorstep is potholes on our roads, and we are again entering pothole season as the weather gets colder and roads again start deteriorating due to years of underinvestment and neglect. But lack of investment is not only about potholes, Presiding Officer. Lack of investment is causing serious accidents and fatalities on our roads. It is tragic that once again we're talking about another fatality just a matter of days ago on the A96. And I want to take this opportunity to send my condolences to the family. These deaths are heartbreaking and we should be doing so much more to prevent these accidents from happening. Presiding Officer, this news is far too common for communities across the country. Communities that have faced far too many fatal or serious accidents on the roads that they rely on. Communities that have been sorely let down by this government. We can't keep talking about it, Presiding Officer. It's National Road Safety Week next week. We need action. We need a government that will take this seriously. We are rapidly approaching 2 decades since the SNP first made promises to deliver much-needed improvements to some of Scotland's most dangerous roads. Almost 2 decades on, those promises remain undelivered. They promised to dual the A96, they haven't. They promised to dual the A90 north of Ellon, they haven't. They promised to dual the A9, they haven't. And I know my colleagues in the south of Scotland will mention other key arterial routes that have been neglected over those 20 years. A long list of broken promises by the SNP government, failure after failure. After years of delay, these desperately needed projects have been kicked further into the long grass by the SNP's decision to allow extremists from the Green Party seize control of roads infrastructure. In their daft ideology, the Greens have punished rural Scots for the unforgivable transgression of driving their car, and the SNP allowed the Greens to do so. The A96 dualling project is a prime example of this. The SNP allowed the Greens into government, and the price they paid was the betrayal of the North East and the ditching of the A96 project. The much-delayed corridor review was a way of kicking the project into the long grass to appease their extremist partners. And we still have no idea when this will be released. The SNP's war on motorists is, in effect, a war on our rural communities. And the Scottish Conservatives will always stand up for our local communities. Recently, Harriet Cross MP and Councillor Gillian Owen and the Why Stop at Ellon campaign highlighted the economic impact of these delays. By putting off these upgrades at the Toll of Burness, the Scottish Government is directly threatening the future prosperity of the region. We have an investment in the road in the North East. We have the Scottish Cluster Carbon Capture Project, ACORN, based in the North East. But the transport infrastructure is being neglected. Back in 2006, then leader of the SNP, Alex Salmond, vowed that if he became First Minister in 2007, the first decision that he would make is to dual the road between Ellon and Peterhead. Still not happened. I would like to see the road dualled, but in the meantime, I repeat my call for the Scottish Government to take action at the toll of Burness and Cortes junctions, to make them safer, to save lives. Towns and villages across the North East and every rural area of Scotland are working hard to improve their communities, build economic growth, be more environmentally aware, attract investment. But at every turn, they feel like barriers are being put up in their way. And we know that the Green Party were absolutely happy to hinder the Government's ability to deliver infrastructure upgrades to communities across Scotland, with Patrick Harvie gleefully boasting of how he would cease funding for road building projects. Happy to cut crucial funding for upgrades that not only help grow the economies of our rural communities and open up new opportunities, but also to stop rural depopulation in so many areas. It's clear that these roads are not a priority for the Scottish Government. Rural Scotland isn't important to them. We've seen this Government since 2016 slash spending on major road projects. And these projects shouldn't be seen as incompatible with our net zero goals. As Fergus Ewing said in this chamber, we should be anti-emission, not anti-car. But most importantly, and what we must never lose sight of, is these improvements will save lives. North to south, east to west, thousands of Scots rely on our roads, and they need a government that shares their priorities. A government that focuses not on ideological agendas, but delivers for the needs of the people that live and work in Scotland. Our communities need good roads to ensure their safety, well-being and economic growth right across rural Scotland. The Central Belt-focused government needs to open its eyes to what is happening in rural Scotland and start delivering for all our communities. While they are focused on priorities of independence and digging health ministers out of holes, the Scottish Conservatives are offering common-sense policies to the people of Scotland. It is only the Scottish Conservatives that understand the needs of our rural communities. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Lumsden. I now call Christine Graham to be followed by Liam Kerr. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I thank the member for bringing this debate, as I have 4 major north to south roads in my rural constituency, Midlothian South, Tweedale and Lauderdale, the A68, the A7, the A701 and 702. And if I may, Deputy Presiding Officer, I will confine myself to these. As you can imagine, over many years here, I am very familiar with them. As, of course, I'm also familiar with lesser highways and byways. I say to Douglas Lumsden, there's no war on rural borders in Midlothian. It was the Scottish Government which built the Borders Railway. But I digress. Let me first of all deal with ubiquitous potholes. My experience of these is probably more frequent as these roads approach Edinburgh, though there's a particularly bad stretch on the Auchendirnie Road which avoids Pennycook. It's a bit of a rat run. And it's not only due to private vehicles, but is undoubtedly caused by heavy commercial vehicles. These knock the stuffing out of our narrow rural roads, and not simply the surface, but often more so the road edges, because these came about to serve horses and carts and were not built for those articulated loaded lorries. Now, I've spoken before about vehicle excise duty, which was once called road tax. Long since simply goes into the UK tax pot. Historically, in the budget of 1909, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer announced that the road system would be self-financing, and so from 1910 the proceeds of road vehicle excise duties were dedicated to fund the building and maintenance of the road system. But even during this period, the majority of the cost of road building and improvement came from general and local taxation, owing to the tax take being too low for the upkeep of the roads. Hypothecation came to an end in 1937, and the proceeds of the vehicle road taxes were paid directly into the Exchequer. The road fund itself, then funded by government grants, was not abolished until 1955, so that's long since gone. But my question is, should it be resurrected? A recent RAC survey of potholes across the UK estimated there are at least 1 million potholes UK-wide. Yet the UK Government collected £7.3 billion in 2023 in vehicle excise duty. That money, as I said, is simply swallowed up by the Treasury. Would it not be fairer if Scotland, indeed England, collected its own road tax and they used it appropriately by ring-fencing it? Some of the money could provide Scotland with £700 million per annum, not simply just to plug potholes, but to assist, maintain and modernise the network. And it's just a thought. In terms of road improvements, and I do appreciate pressures on budgets, both governmental and council, but what would certainly help on rural roads in my constituency, especially in dark mornings and evenings, would be better road markings, central reflectors and white lines, not just down the central, but at road edges. Because some of the roads in my constituency, out with the towns and villages, can be a very tough drive on a dark and especially rainy night. I'm also pleased to see staggered speed limits introduced, for example, entering and leaving Stow, extending the 20-mile-an-hour limit to 40 to a place called Stage Hall and then to 60. This has helped a great deal with safety on the roads. It's now been extended, it happens at Eddleston, and I'm now campaigning to have the same done on the A702. That is to extend the 40-mile-an-hour limit northwards from Dolphinton to at least what's known as the Garwald Junction, because it's a particularly fast and dangerous stretch. But I have to say, and I note the dreadful statistics of road deaths, roads, frankly, are not the real culprit. Just because the speed limit is 60 miles an hour, you don't do that going around sharp bends when in any event you might come across some of the many cyclists on the borders roads. There are other issues with city drivers who may be unaware of the specific challenges: stray farm animals, wildlife, slow-moving farm vehicles for starters. So these are just some of my observations on the problems and challenges of rural roads. But I would like us to look again at least some of the vehicle excise duty being apportioned to Scotland's roads and indeed to England's roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. I now call Liam Kerr to be followed by Colin Smith. Mr Kerr, up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate Douglas Lumsden on bringing this debate, particularly because on the day that this party have highlighted the attack on farms and rural life by both governments, he highlights the SNP's long-term failure to address rural infrastructure, particularly, but by no means exclusively, in the North East. And what is most galling is that while the accidents pile up, while families suffer, while the North East economy is under such huge pressure, nothing of any substance gets done. But the solutions are there. I had a constituent the other day saying to me that she travels regularly between Fraserburgh and Aberdeen, in darkness during the winter months, of course. And she reports, as have many, and I know from driving it myself, that at the Tolla Burness, in darkness, it is difficult to see the road markings. And she says that street lighting is needed just to illuminate the filter onto the A952. She reports, as anyone in the North East knows, it's the same issue at the treacherous Cortes Junction that Douglas Lumsden mentioned. Yet the obvious solution hasn't been implemented, despite being cost-effective, despite being quickly implemented, and it would solve at least a problem straight away. And as for the nearly 2 decades-old promise to dual the road, I sat down with Graham Adams last week, one of Fraserburgh's biggest and most important businesses. They transport up to 30 newly manufactured semi-trailers every week from their factory in the Broch, south on the A952, right turn onto the A90 at the Tolla Burness, then onto their customers. Around 70 HGVs a week, many of which are articulated lorries, head the other way, whether it be for accident repair, refurbishment, or delivering materials to the factory. And then, of course, they return again. In total, Graham Adams-related HGVs, which can have a combination length of 18 metres or more, take the Tolla Burness junction around 170 times every week. In other words, they know what they're talking about. And they told me that if the... will I have time, Presiding Officer?
If the intervention is brief, yes. Ms Christine Graham.
It will be. Would the member perhaps share with me that perhaps we should look at some of the vehicle excise duty, which lorries and commercial vehicles pay more? They wouldn't feel so bad about if it was being apportioned to the road network.
Liam Kerr.
I certainly listened to Christine Graham's comments earlier, and I think it's worth reflecting on. I think we have to look at whether or not that what she proposes would result in less money. So we need to look at the consequences of her proposals. But I do recognise that it's worth reflecting upon. Back to Graham Adams, because what I'm trying to put forward is that they know what they're doing. And they told me that if the SNP show no signs of dualling the road as they promised 2 decades ago, then surely they'd at least consider some passing lanes on the A952 to avoid frustration and risky manoeuvres. Or at the toll, where the HGVs take their lives in their hands when exiting the junction onto the A90 from the A952. They suggest that, as concerns have been raised that a roundabout might not solve the issue, as it would slow the flow of traffic and still present risks due to the number of HGVs, buses and agricultural tractors at this point, a number of knowledgeable voices have proposed a single carriageway flyover from the 952 onto the southbound A90 with an additional slip road for traffic turning north off the 952 going north. I hear that this solution could remove the safety concerns from that junction and allow for free-flowing traffic in all directions whilst being a fraction of the cost and presumably planning of other suggestions. The key point, presiding officer, is that those people who know the road and know the dangers of turning in an HGV have the solutions which they are happy to share with anyone who will listen. And they will be as disappointed as I that not one North East SNP MSP has bothered to come to this chamber tonight to listen to this debate. It's a disgrace, presiding officer. And those solutions that they would have heard are cheaper, easier and quicker. Presiding officer, a few years ago when learning about the dangerous Candy Junction, I sat in the cab of a Douglas Mitchell haulage HGV to experience the terror of a right turn on the A90 at the Candy Junction. The experience has never left me, which is why Graham Adams have offered the Cabinet Secretary and anyone else from this chamber, from the Council, or indeed anyone who can help and needs to understand, the opportunity to join them. They propose to collect in Ellen, take the A90 to Peterhead, round the Broch, down to Ellen via the A952, through Mintlaw, with a right turn at the Tulliburness. I know that anyone that sees what it's really like to drive those roads in an HGV will definitely take notice and start actively seeking solutions instead of kicking this into the long grass. That's why I've said I'll join them in the cab. Perhaps in closing, the Cabinet Secretary will let us know whether she's brave enough to join me.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. I now call Colin Smith to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Douglas Lumsden for his motion and the opportunity to highlight the chronic neglect of our rural road infrastructure. Like all members, my inbox is regularly full of angry motorists, cyclists, pedestrians, frustrated at the plague of potholes on our roads and crumbling pavements. And the cause is clear. There's been a double whammy of cuts to our councils. Firstly, we've had a cumulative cut of over £6 billion from the Scottish Government to local government since 2013-14. The proportion of the Scottish Government budget going to local government has fallen from 34% in 2013-14 to 28% in 2022-23. The Scottish Government has made proportionally deeper reductions in local budgets than any central government budget. Secondly, because so many areas of those local budgets are ring-fenced by central government, when it comes to making cuts, investment infrastructure often takes a bigger hit because it isn't ring-fenced. And we see the consequences. Data obtained by Scottish Labour revealed the road repair backlog bill across Scotland is an eye-watering £2.6 billion. I'll give way on that point. Yeah.
Finlay Carson.
I very much appreciate the member giving away and echo his concerns about the council funding, but does he also recognise that under the Labour SNP Council in Dumfries and Galloway we saw cuts to the road improvements, and would you welcome the £30 million that the Scottish Conservative-led Council are putting into the roads that are seeing a tangible improvement?
Colin Smith.
That budget of £30 million extra was supported by every group on the council. But I have to say, we've had Conservative administrations in an awful lot longer than we've had Labour or other parties' administrations. And the consequence of that is a staggering £250 million alone in backlogs of repairs needed in Dumfries and Galloway. So it's not a legacy, I have to say, that Finlay Carson should be particularly proud of. And in the Scottish Borders, the road repair bill is also around £123 million. That's a leap from £97 million the previous year in Conservative-run Scottish Borders. In South Ayrshire, it's also risen to nearly £51 million, again a Conservative-led administration. So it's not a legacy that we should be celebrating. But, Presiding Officer, it's not just in those local roads that rural communities see the consequences of cuts. Often where you have important trunk roads that cut across rural areas, no matter how strategically important they are, they've suffered from chronic underinvestment, which makes them dangerous, hampers economic progress and actually slows efforts to improve the environment. Take the A75 and the A77, key routes to the ferry terminal at Cairnryan, the 5th busiest port in the UK. It's the hub which businesses from not just South Scotland but Central Scotland and Northern England trade into Northern Ireland, then south into the EU. At its heart, the need to upgrade the A75 and the A77 is about saving lives, but it's also about improving them too. Bypassing the towns and villages through which the roads currently run would cut congestion and emissions from Springholm and Crocketford to Girvan and Kirkoswald. Yet 2 years after the much-delayed Strategic Transport Projects Review was published, there's still no delivery plan from the Scottish Government, even for the very modest, inadequate improvements proposed to both roads, and not a single penny of investment promised in upgrading either. The only investment we have proposed in the A75 is that the £5 million announced in the recent UK Government budget to complete a feasibility study into possible upgrades. So I hope, in a closing comments, the Cabinet Secretary will now say when that study will be carried out. I would also urge that the Cabinet Secretary, when she meets with members of the A77 Action Group later this month, to listen to their call for a task force to bring together local stakeholders with Transport Scotland and Amy Highways to explore what more can be done to better manage road closures on both roads when maintenance is being carried out. Now, everyone understands that for road safety reasons, some closures are needed, but when those closures are in a rural location, it often means the diversion is lengthy, and it also drives the traffic onto small rural roads that are simply not built for the HGVs diverted onto them, causing damage and disruption to communities. But in concluding, Presiding Officer, above all else, I hope the Cabinet Secretary in her comments will set up when we'll see a clear delivery and investment plan for these two key rural roads, which will save lives, grow an economy and improve the environment in the towns and villages across the South West.
Thank you, Mr Smith. I now call Brian Whittle to be followed by Emma Harper. Mr Whittle, up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate my colleague Douglas Lumsden for bringing this debate to the Chamber, the importance of the rural road infrastructure. And it seems to be a bit of déjà vu, because this is a topic that I seem to have spoken on ever since I came into this place nearly 9 years ago. And the reality is we do have a crisis in our rural communities. We have migration from rural to urban, and it's a migration, this kind of migration is something the Scottish Government don't really want to talk about. And that continual abandonment of the rural constituents leaves, but the Scottish Government no longer leaves areas like the South West as just the forgotten part of Scotland. Rather, given the many times this issue has been raised by my colleagues and I in this chamber, I think the South West and other rural communities are now the ignored part of Scotland. And I've said many times in here, as my colleagues, over the last decade, the amount of money spent in the South West rural infrastructure is a mere 0.4% of the total transport budget. The businesses require, if we want businesses to come into the rural areas, those businesses need the ability to get their goods in and out. And as Colin Smith mentioned there, in the A77, A75, one of the busiest ports in Britain at Cairnryan is serviced by the A77 and the A75, which has been promised an upgrade for many, many years. Firstly by Alex Salmond when he opened the ports at Cairnryan, said that one of his things he would do urgently was to upgrade those roads. 2011, Alex Neil said it was a disgrace that the last Labour government had not upgraded these roads. And then subsequent transport ministers like Humza Yousaf and Jenny Goruth and Michael Matheson came down to the South West and listened. In fact, I remember very much, and I think Mr Carson will remember this, when Michael Matheson came down, he was late to that meeting because there had been an accident in the 77 and there was a delay. And like my colleague Liam Kerr, I have taken the opportunity to get into one of these 44-tonne lorries and driven down, or been driven down it was scary if I was driving it, been driven down the A77, and it is quite frightening. It's hard enough to go down these roads just in a car, but when you have £1.2 billion worth of goods going through the port of Cairnryan in these 44-tonne vehicles, that is a significant amount of traffic. So I think that that's sort of replicated across the whole of Scotland's rural communities. Without new businesses and services and schools and education and community facilities hurry along that migration out of our rural communities, and why would the next generation stay in the rural communities when there are fewer and fewer jobs available, less and less services and activities to participate in? Deputy Presiding Officer, to support our rural communities, they need to be able to attract jobs to the area. To be able to get those goods in and out, as I said before, we need good quality roads and an upgrade of our rail, to be fair. I think we're waiting for STPR2, which has been kicking around now for 7 years or so, and still, even though it gets diluted every time it comes out, we still haven't got a plan to deliver on that STPR2. And we have a rail link down to Stranraer, which, even if there's a spur off into Cairnryan, where we could take some of those goods off of the roads, which would have a positive impact on the A77. Even that, although it is an STPR2, nothing has been said about it. I think this Scottish Government just doesn't seem to understand rural issues. And if it did, it would not keep making and breaking transport infrastructure promises. It's time, I think, genuinely to recognise the issues that our rural communities face and the solutions that are required by those rural communities. And once again, Deputy Presiding Officer, I thank Douglas Lumsden for once again giving me the opportunity to speak about this in the Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. I now call Emma Harper to be followed by Tim Eagle. Ms Harper, up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Like all the other colleagues, I congratulate Douglas Lumsden on securing this debate. As Mr Lumsden's motion states, driving is an essential part of daily life for those living in rural communities, and the motion continues by saying believes that communities deserve the infrastructure to allow connectivity that is safe and enables access to vital services. I absolutely agree with that. I care about rural communities. It may not be a surprise to colleagues, but I'm going to focus my contribution on rural road infrastructure in the south west of Scotland. Like many of us have spoken previously, we've raised debates on this matter, we've raised questions for the Government, and we've talked about the needs for improvements in the main arterial routes, A75 and 77. And we've also raised the fact that both routes are crucial arterial routes for the south west. And we're hearing that again this evening, Presiding Officer. Fundamentally, it is time to see much needed upgrades on both main roads and, of course, the other roads that serve our south west area, the 711 through the 714 and the 701 and 709 as well. Safety is a key concern for me since 2016, since coming to this place. And I too recognise that the Road Safety Week is November 17 to 23 next week. There have been too many fatalities, too many families affected and too many loved ones lost. And I also just want to thank the campaign groups, the A75 and A77 action groups. Their continued campaigning efforts cannot be underplayed. Presiding Officer, there is consensus from the Scottish and UK governments that both the A77 and A75 must be improved. We have commitments from both governments, but now the focus must be on transforming these commitments into action as quickly as possible. Yeah, well, thank you.
Finlay Carson.
And I put on record well my support for the A77, A75 campaigns. But surely, given the number of years we've been waiting for improvements, you must share that frustration at the Scottish Government not stepping up to the mark and delivering.
Always through the chair, Emma Harper.
Thank Finlay Carson for that intervention. I'm on my feet here tonight. Doesn't that demonstrate that I I'm concerned about what my constituents and in my whole region are thinking about as well. So yeah, I understand that there are a lot of frustrations out there. You know, there's a focus and a support and a need to look at what we can do to make improvements. And, you know, there's a focus right now with the South West Transport Alliance, who had a summit in Stranraer on the 29th of January. And a fortnight ago, I was in Stranraer at a meeting exactly about the issues on the 77 and the 75. And at the summit, the South Scotland elected members, as well as representatives from Stena Line, Pino Ferries, NHS, D&G Council and business, all agreed on the absolute need for road upgrades. The Scottish Government published the Strategic Transport Projects Review No. 2, STPR2, in 2022, and the document states that the A77 and the 75 will benefit from improving junctions, enhancing overtaking opportunities, creating climbing lanes at appropriate locations where slow-moving traffic leads to risky overtaking manoeuvres. They also are committing to widening and realigning carriageways to alleviate pinch points. These recommendations, once enacted, will bring about real and meaningful change for constituents. There is a challenge, though, with the funding. The Scottish Government does continue to operate with a tight economic situation, without the ability to commit to huge infrastructure spending, meaning it is necessary for the UK Government to come forward with funding to ensure the upgrades needed for the roads. And I know that the Cabinet Secretary has been working well with the UK Government, and I think that is really welcome. So I do welcome that Labour has affirmed that the £8 million commitment to look at feasibility for bypassing Springholm and Crocketford is going to proceed. But I'll finish there, Presiding Officer. In conclusion, I repeat my ask of the Minister that the economic importance of the A75 and 77 must be acknowledged for how it supports the Central Belt as well, in what Colin Smith has talked about in terms of Cairnryan being the 5th largest port to access Ireland and the rest of Europe. So I will conclude there, Presiding Officer, because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you, Ms Harper. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Douglas Ross. Mr Eagle, up to 4 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Douglas Lumsden on securing this debate on what is a very important issue, actually? And can I echo the comments of Douglas Lumsden and Liam Kerr on their views around the A96? And I'm sure my regional colleague Douglas Ross will pick up on this again later on. I am pretty frustrated that there is no member of the Green Party here, given how often they want to go in the papers to slate road development across Scotland. And there is nothing that makes my blood boil more than picking up a national paper by an inner-city member of the Green Party telling me that I'm not allowed the dualling of the A96 in the North East. What I want to remind members on this, before I move on to the rest and be thankful, is when you live up in Murray, when you live in the North East, and you see the amount of near misses on that road every single day, you will become aware of just why that road has to be dualled. You might hear of the deaths, as tragic as they are, but every single day we are experiencing problems on that road. But I want to turn my attention to the A83 Rest and Be Thankful, because I was delighted to meet with John Gurr and the rest of the Rest and Be Thankful campaign group last week to hear the direct views of residents and businesses, a group who, I have to be honest, are sadly at their wits' end. Now, this hasn't been helped by a series of revelations, because I've been asking some parliamentary questions on this. That £16 million has been paid to consultancy firms, £2.3 million has been paid to the landowner of the old military diversion route, and almost £5 million has been spent on replacing netting along the rest. All the while, a spade has yet to go in the ground on either the medium or long-term solutions. Yet this is an absolutely critical road for the Argyll and Bute region. Residents and businesses could live with these costs if work might be happening to upgrade the road, but more time has been spent talking about the route rather than ensuring it meets the needs of residents and businesses. I cannot stress enough the impact the closure of this road is having. One haulage company was telling me it's into the millions of pounds, and this is at a time when the whole region wants to expand, particularly in things like the Scotch whisky industry. I realise the A83 task force meetings are giving some information, but the community does remain worried, and I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary is aware of that, but that worry really does remain. A clear timeline is needed so that communities know when that work will begin. There is a commitment, but we need a timeline. It isn't just large infrastructure projects, though, that are impacted by a lack of action, but smaller routes too. I was in the Western Isles a couple of weeks ago, and I visited the Black House village near Carloway, a historic site which is growing in popularity with tourists. It has a small road, a small single-track road, which is struggling to cope with the tourism buses in the peak season, and the road needs to be widened. After years of cuts to local government budgets, Western Isles Council has said that it simply cannot afford the repairs. But the local community have managed to get little passing places in for parents as they walk with their buggies down the road. But that's not good enough. The Scottish Government has passed the buck to the Council on this, which has resulted in an effective stalemate on the issue. Local residents, as well as those that manage the Black Houses, are deeply worried that there may be an accident at some point, especially if the volume of traffic continues to increase. With rural depopulation on the rise, I would ask the Cabinet Secretary to look at different ways in which the Scottish Government can help with upgrades on locally managed roads, which are required for local tourism and economic benefit. Deputy Presiding Officer, all of the roads I have referred to vary in size, use and location, as well as all of the ones that will be discussed by others across regions in Scotland. But all of them have a profound impact on the communities around them. I don't suggest we can build all these roads overnight, but communities need to know that the Scottish Government are committed to these works on these roads and produce definite timelines of when they will be delivered.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. I now call Douglas Ross to be followed by Finlay Carson. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and can I also congratulate Douglas Lumsden on securing this debate, but also an excellent opening speech where he looked at both trunk roads and smaller rural roads, and I want to do the same. First of all, if I look at my home area of Murray, Murray Council is responsible for approximately 1,000 miles of roads throughout the county. And it is a budget that is always under pressure, as council budgets are, after years and years of cuts from this SNP Scottish Government. And it means when issues are raised, sometimes we don't have the funding to make changes immediately to improve the safety on some of these roads. And I think that is something we have to consider ahead of the budget later on this year, in terms of allocation of funding going to councils to make improvements to roads, both with potholes, as we heard earlier, but also to improve the safety. If I think of the A941 between Lossy and Elgin, we have seen a number of very serious accidents this year alone, indeed with fatalities, tragically young lives lost on that road earlier this year. Another issue that's not been spoken about much tonight, but affects all of our communities, is speeding on many of these roads. If I think about Roseisle, at my surgeries in Roseisle, every time I go there, I raise issues with the police, the council and others, but I've got constituents who end up with cars literally in their garden because of the speed that traffic goes through Roseisle. Toms Hill, very close to where I stay, has seen an increase in the number of speeding vehicles going through there, and we do need to see action from the local authority, but also from the police to try and deal with this problem. But I do want to focus as well tonight on the A96. It's an issue that I raised with the Cabinet Secretary at questions recently, and is an issue that continues to be at the top of the agenda politically and with businesses and with individual constituents in Murray, in the Highlands and in the North East. And on Monday, the Inverness Courier launched a petition, and I've signed that petition and I'm urging constituents to do the same. The petition is asking the Scottish Government, by the end of this year, to set out a clear timescale for the dualling of the A96 between Inverness and Nairn and the construction of a Nairn bypass. So I hope, in summing up tonight, the Minister will outline how she plans to respond to that petition, because it's already gathered hundreds of supporters. I expect it to gather more, and they are asking for this clear timeline by the end of this year, so we can know for sure when that part of the 96 will be dualled and the bypass for Nairn will be constructed. And I think that's crucial. And I would agree, and I know Fergus Ewing's not here tonight, but he states in his own support, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this on his behalf, that it is absolutely vital that this petition is understood and accepted by the Scottish Government. So in his own words, they don't try to kick this into the long grass for another year and a half and get themselves to the next Holyrood election. I think Fergus Ewing is absolutely right on that, and I'd be very grateful to hear from the Cabinet Secretary about her response to the Inverness Courier petition tonight. Finally, I want to look at the rest of the A96, because also on Monday, another tragedy happened on the A96. A 27-year-old woman lost her life in a collision with a lorry between Brodie and Forres. And my sympathies go to her, her family and her friends. But it is yet another fatality on this road. So when the Cabinet Secretary, and I've heard the First Minister do it as well, say that when they speak about the A96, they always speak about Inverness to Nairn. That's important, but the A96 goes far further than Inverness to Nairn. It goes through Murray. We've never had that bypass for Elgin or Keith. It then goes through Aberdeenshire all the way to Aberdeen. So we need a commitment for this Scottish Government to finally accept that they are going to do what they promised, what they asked people to vote for them for, and that is fully dual the A96 in its entirety from Aberdeen to Inverness. And hopefully we can see fatalities like we saw on Monday becoming a thing of the past, because too many lives have been lost on that road already. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Ross. And I now call Finlay Carson up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I thank my colleague Douglas Lumsden for bringing this important debate to the Chamber. I'm going to take a bit of a risk tonight. I've got a 4-minute speech prepared, but I'm actually going to go completely off-piste. Because when it comes to a subject in this Parliament, A75, I know it inside out. I know it like the back of my hand. And I declare an interest as living next to that road for nearly every single day of my 57-year life. And I know most of you will be surprised I'm as old as that. But, you know, I declare an interest because I've had 3 family members killed on the A75 over the years. Indeed, my great-auntie was the first person to be killed by a motor car in Scotland when she was killed literally a yard from my front door when she was only 6 by a car driven by the local doctor. That was over 100 years ago. So the A75 is something that not just me as the member for Galloway and West Dumfries, but nearly every single person who lives and works in the south of Scotland, or Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is an everyday part of their life. Whether that's getting to work, whether it's getting to school, there's no way of avoiding it. It's the main artery that runs right through the region. But it's not just important for the people who live in Dumfries and Galloway. A77 and the A75 contribute or they carry a whopping £67 million worth of goods every single day. That's close on £9 billion annually, with 400,000 freight vehicles travelling along the 95-mile route between Gretna and the ports at Cairnryan. And we've heard already from Brian Whittle about the continual commitments we've had from this SNP government, with Alex Salmond attending and talking about the 3 Rs, rail, roads and regeneration. None of them, not one of them, has been delivered in Dumfries and Galloway. We've seen no rail improvements and we've seen no road improvements in that time. And more recently, to back up Aileen MacLeod's failed election campaign in 2016, the now First Minister and then Deputy First Minister pledged to improve journey times in the A75, one of many pledges that have been put to one side. You know, it's something that we stand up here, and Emma Harper and Colin Smith and Brian Whittle repeatedly ask for improvements. We were promised for years that news on upgrades would be delivered through STPR2, and that was much delayed. And it mentions the A75, but it's the only project within the STPR2 that didn't have a timeline attached to it. It still doesn't have a timeline or a budget attached to it. So perhaps the Cabinet Secretary, in our closing, can actually tell us whether a timetable has been established to get work started on the A75. You know, we've seen the UK government, the UK Conservative government, previously in the Sir Peter Hendy review, highlighted the importance of the A75. And eventually, the SNP government put their constitutional grievance to one side and did sit round the table because they appreciated the importance of the route. Sadly, the £8 million committed by the Tory government has been reduced back to £5 million, but that should be enough money to get the feasibility study done and actually put a bit of pressure on the Scottish Government, who, after all, it is their responsibility to invest the money that has been promised decade after decade to see improvements in this road. The people of Crocketford and Springholm are tired of the talk, tired of the commitments, and still they're seeing HGVs passing within feet of their door. You know, then continued road closures, and I think we've had 9 complete road closures due to accidents recently, and complete road closures due to upgrades because the carriageway is not wide enough to safely carry out the maintenance. It's quite incredible, given that it results in many cases of a 96-mile diversion on roads which are certainly not fit for the HGVs that we see in the road. Safety, of course, is of paramount importance, and I would like to also have had a bit of movement on the use of average speed cameras, rather than relying on speed vans that sit in very predictable places on the road, and they don't come out at night. So as soon as the police activity has disappeared for the day, speeding continues right through the night. I just want to say I'm delighted that the First Minister has accepted my invitation to come to the South West to witness the problems, particularly in Crockett Ford and Springholm, at first hand, and to meet concerned parties. And in conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, perhaps if the investment had taken place earlier, we might not be inheriting major safety and reliable issues that we're seeing on the road today, which is really putting strains on rural life.
Thank you, Mr Carson. I now call on Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, I'd like to thank Douglas Lumsden for securing this debate, and I will focus my remarks on his motion on the A90, although I acknowledge it has been an opportunity for all the different rural roads, trunk and local authority to be made by members, as we've heard. And I want to start by expressing my sincere sympathies to the families of anyone who has been killed or injured on our roads. And our thoughts are with the family and friends of those involved in recent incidents, including the collision injuring a pedestrian that occurred on the 8th of October on the A952 local authority road close to the A90 at the toll of Burness, resulting sadly in a fatality. Up to the 7th of September 2024, there have been 3 serious accidents at the junction itself in the previous 5 years. Road safety remains of paramount importance to this government, and this is reflected in our ambition to have 0 deaths or serious injuries on our roads by 2050, with an interim target to halve the number of people killed or seriously injured on the road by 2030. Now, I've listened closely to the discussion today and fully appreciate members' desire to see further action on improvements, and specifically to the A90. The evidence-based transport appraisal that supported both the first Strategic Transport Projects Review in 2008 and the more recent second review in 2022 did not recommend the dualling of the A90 north of Ellon. Furthermore, I'm not appraised of any commitment made in 2007 by this government, and nor are my officials, and the SNP manifesto for the 2007 Scottish parliamentary elections did not contain a commitment to dual the A90 north of Ellon. This government recognises that investment in our responsibility for trunk roads is crucial for rural connectivity and accessing essential services. And that is why funding is prioritised in line with sustainable investment hierarchy on maintaining and safely operating our trunk roads and motorways. I'll move on, if you don't mind, Presiding Officer. This is clearly reflected in our strategic infrastructure priorities in SPR2 recommendations 30, 31 and 32. Our firm focus is ensuring that our road network remains safe, resilient and adapted to address the evolving changes of climate change. And I remain committed to improving road safety across Scotland and delivering our ambitious casualty reduction targets set out in Scotland's Road Safety Framework to 2030. Now, this commitment is demonstrated through this SNP's government's record investment in road safety in 2024-25 and substantial uplift in trunk road maintenance of 30% this year, which contradicts Conservative misplaced assertions. I'll give way to Douglas Lumsden.
Douglas Lumsden.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking an intervention. She mentioned reports coming. One of the things we are waiting on is the corridor review on the A96. So can the Cabinet Secretary tell us if that corridor review will be actually published this year?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, it will. We've committed £14 million this year to support local road safety, with over £2 million being invested in local authorities within the north east of Scotland. My officials and I are in regular discussion with a range of operational partners. Just 2 weeks ago, I chaired the National Road Safety Strategic Partnership Board, and tomorrow the local partnership forum for the North will take place. And as a nation, we need to address driver behaviour, which a number of people have mentioned, which is consistently of concern when collisions are considered. Now, I am aware and have heard members speak to their concerns regarding the toll of Burness and Portest junctions. And I would note that in 2017, when consulted by Aberdeenshire Council on a planning application that impacted the toll of Burness Junction, Transport Scotland recommended that the junction be upgraded
in order to mitigate the impact of future developments in Mintlaw. Aberdeenshire Council agreed with this recommendation and imposed an infrastructure capacity of 200 houses across the allocated sites within Mintlaw. The mechanism for delivering the necessary upgrade is a matter for the Council and the developers, and in this regard they have entered into a planning agreement to secure a financial contribution towards the works. Neither this Government's infrastructure investment nor the road safety review process supersedes the need for the Council and developers to mitigate their housing and development impacts on the trunk road network. In terms of the Cortes Junction, Transport Scotland continues to assess the safety performance of the link between Rathdon and Cortes Junction, with a further study into potential vehicle conflicts planned to better understand any operational issues. We expect that by the end of the year. This Government appreciates the importance of ensuring that our roads are operationally safe and effective. Clearly, this involves addressing any defects in a timely matter. And in despite of the fiscal challenges we currently face, and I would remind the Conservative Government that the Liz Truss quasi-quarterm budget decimated the budgeting of the UK Government and the Scottish Government and took a huge amount of capital out of investment, and that is an ongoing legacy and problem. But we are, despite that, we are investing record amounts in essential road maintenance schemes, our bridge strengthening programme and increasing the resilience of the network to the effects of climate change. Since 2007, over £297 million has been invested in the maintenance of the A90 to ensure its safe and efficient operation. In the 2023-24 financial year, over £27.8 million was invested in the maintenance of the route. Now, our investment in trunk roads in the North East is not limited to maintaining the existing network or road safety improvements. It was the SNP government that completed the opening of a new £49.5 million dual carriageway link road at Hodigan in May 2022 in the North East. This is in addition to the £745 million investment this SNP government has made in delivering the 58 kilometres of the A90 Aberdeen West peripheral route, which includes the 12-kilometre section of dual carriageway between Balmedy and Tipperty to the north of Aberdeen in the north east of Scotland. And we should not forget the £10.2 million spent removing the pinch point at Inverramsey Bridge. Presiding Officer, as I come to a conclusion, this Government will continue to strive for all road deaths and serious injuries to be greatly reduced, and I would urge all MPs to assist in supporting the road safety campaigns, challenging driver behaviour and promoting road safety. And I understand Douglas Lumsden has been invited, and I hope accepted, to take part in the MSP road safety event that is being run here in the Parliament. We will invest in the A90 and in all of Scotland's trunk roads. We have a firm plan on how and what to invest in. It's set out in SBR2, and our ambitions for investment are continually being tempered, however, by pressure on our budgets. And I can assure members that we are committed to investing in our rural trunk roads as part of the trunk road network across Scotland, connecting communities and for families, and as many members have identified, supporting our economy as well. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting.